the zone to be. From my yin to my yang to my yang to Z. Put a grin on my chin when you come to me. Cause I'll win, I'm a one of a kind, and I'll bring death to the place you're about to be. Another river of blood running under my feet. Forged in a fire lit long ago. Stand next to me, you'll never stand alone. I'm last to leave, but the first to go. Lord, make me dead before you make me old. I feed on the fear of the devil inside of the enemy faces in my sight. Aim with a hand, shoot with a mind, kill with a heart like Arctic ice.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a soldier and I'm marching on.
I am a warrior, this is my song.
I am a warrior and this is my song. I'm basking the glow of the rising war. Lay waste to the ground of an enemy shore.
I read you, Lima Charlie, loud and clear.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode 24 of Lima Charlie. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and joining my good friend. I don't even know how long I've known him, but I know it's not as long as he spent in the Army. New York State Command Sergeant Major retired Bob Van Pelt. Bob, great to see you, buddy.
Same here, Troy.
It's been, I don't know when we first met, but boy, it was a minute ago.
It's probably one of our state, senior enlisted conferences around New York State. Matter of fact, I say that it was probably Yellow Ribbons because I remember you meeting your wife for the first time out in Buffalo.
Everyone remembers her. I'm just known as her husband. So,
aren't we all?
Yes, yeah. So, but anyways, thank you so much for joining me. You are the first. You check off a few first for us tonight on Lima Charlie, and we'll get through that as we go through this. So there's a few things that you're the first of we've ever had. So I want to thank you for giving me some of your Tuesday night and joining us. Like I say, Command Sergeant Major retired. You got the Signal Brigade shirt on, so kind of stand out there. Still look like you can still be in. You're still in great shape. You got the mustache and military standard. I mean, a little bit better than me. I kind of let mine go. I took advantage of that, but you could probably get back in uniform at any time and it probably still fits.
I think I weigh less now than when I retired 11 years ago or 14 years ago.
It's all that good Army chow nothing like that. But hey,
I'm married to an Italian, so I eat good anyway.
Yeah, you do. I was gonna say, how is that possible? It must be all that morning PT. But hey, so yeah, again, thank you so much for joining. You've got a lot of years in it. We're talking right before the show. What was the count? You still remember, which is amazing.
42 years, 3 months, 27 days.
You like double retired, essentially.
Yeah.
You more than double. You double retired and knocked out a couple more years. So, no, that's great. So why don't you kind of give our listeners and viewers a little bit about the interesting story and perspective you have of how you joined and why you joined.
Well, I always like to tell folks that my uncle had me join, my Uncle Sam. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and when you went for your pre-induction physical, I was back in 1968. I went for pre-induction, and they sent you 2 tokens to get the subway and then come home. Well, on March 4th, well, actually probably around February 26th, 27th, I got home. I was still living with my parents, and I got home from bowling one night, and on the table was a letter with 1 token. And you open it up, and I got drafted. And went to basic training. I was working for Con Edison at the time, and I called my boss up. I said, I won't be in to work tomorrow. Matter of fact, I won't be in for 2 years. And he said, what's up? I said, I got drafted. So on March 4th of 1969, I went down to the Fort Hamilton, and they put me on a plane for the first time in my life I ever flew, and they sent me down to Fort Jackson. Got down to basic training in Fort Jackson, and luckily I took radio and TV repair in high school for 3 years, so my electrical score on the test was like in the high 130s. So they called me in when I was in basic, and a recruiter said, hey, with your scores, if you sign up for another year, we'll let you pick your school and your MOS. And I said, okay. So I opened up a book. He handed me an MOS book. And in the book, it had slide and projector repair, 8 weeks, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. Well, being from Brooklyn, Fort Monmouth's only 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
So I told him I'd take that. And the guy looked at me and he said, well, that school doesn't start till August. Let me look. So he opens up the MOS book and he finds 32 Delta, fixed station technical controller, Fort Monmouth, 23 weeks. So, and he looked at me and he said, fixed station, it's always big buildings, 25 to one shot. You won't go to Vietnam. Okay, I'm not going to go to Vietnam. I'm going to be at Fort Monmouth for 23 weeks. What do I sign? So I wound up getting discharged after 6 days and re-enlisting for that extra year. And don't know how far you want me to go with this. When I got down to Fort Monmouth, here's a good story. Before I got drafted, I agreed to take a friend of mine to a high school prom. Well, it just turned out where the day I was supposed to report to AIT at Fort Monmouth was the day that she was the day of a prom. Well, when I called up Fort Monmouth and said, hey, here's the situation. May 7th, I'm supposed to be going to a high school prom. And the first sergeant said, well, come on down, check in, and we'll give you a pass. So innocent Duke PFC Bob Van Pelt goes down to Fort Monmouth, and I talked to the clerk down there, and he said, you can't have a pass for 2 weeks. I said, well, you don't understand. I talked to the first sergeant. And at the same time, the first sergeant came out of his office, and the clerk called him over, and I explained to him. I said, well, first sergeant, I spoke to you, during the week, and you said I can get a pass. He said, well, you can't have a pass for 2 weeks. So I looked at him, I said, well, where do I put my bags? And he said, what do you mean? I said, I'm going AWOL. Talk about a set of chops.
Started out on top.
Well, it turned out where there was one of the instructors that was at Fort Monmouth used to commute from Brooklyn. So the first sergeant hooked me up, drove me back to Brooklyn with my little mosquito. Actually, I was a PV2 because I had my little mosquito wings in my uniform. And I took her to prom that night. And the guy picked me up in the morning, about 5 a.m. in the morning, and drove me back down to Fort Monmouth. So
did you go to prom?
Huh?
Did you wear your uniform at the prom?
Yep. She wanted me. I gave her the option. She said yes. So I went there, like I said, with my mosquito wings on. Hey, saved me the cost of a tuxedo.
Yeah. Didn't even have to rent a tux. Boy.
Well, the good part was we started school on June 3rd of 1969. And remember I said about 90% chance I won't go to Vietnam. There was 13 guys in the class. And the instructor walked in, and I'll clean this one up. And he said, by the way, you realize that 90% of you guys are going to Vietnam. I said, son of a gun. And one guy went to Ethiopia, and one guy went to Germany. The other 11 went to something in Vietnam. Where I lucked out was because I did so well in school, I got an 8-week extension and worked data communications. And that's another whole story unto itself. So basically, I was at Fort Monmouth for 8 months going to school.
Wow.
And
so I got notified you were going to go to Vietnam. You still had to go back and do schooling.
Well, what happened was when I my initial course, they were looking for people to go to this 8-week extension, and a good friend of mine who was still, matter of fact, I just saw him last week when I was in Nevada. He was on day shift, I was on night shift, and he saw me. He said, "By the way, they're looking for volunteers." So I said, "Hell, put my name in." So he did. So when I went down to talk about this 8-week extension, the sergeant major, the operations sergeant major, said, "You realize this is a direct assignment to Vietnam?" And I said, "Well, Sergeant Major, I already have, I'm already on levy to go to Vietnam." He said, "Oh man, if you're on levy, I can't put you in for it." And he looked up at the clock, and it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he said, "Hell, I have to have this name in by 5:30. I'll put you in." So lucked out. Came home.
I mean, it seems like you lucked out a lot when you first came.
Oh, you don't know. I'm telling you, Troy, you don't know. So it turned out where I did the 8-week extension, did pretty well. There was only 8 guys in the class. Me and my friend, well, by that time I was a PFC. Mike was an E4. Whenever I say Mike Hay, his last name is actually Hay. There was 3. We were the 2 lowest ranking guys in the class. There was Air Force guys in there, blah, blah, blah. So we got trained up on data communications. So I was at school 8 months, going to school, came home. While I was at Fort Monmouth, Debbie, well, you know my wife, Debbie and I got engaged, but I wouldn't get married until I came home from Vietnam. Because back then, if you look at the papers back in '69, the chances of coming home were pretty slim. Or,
right.
the odds, it wasn't that bad. But So anyway, I shipped over to Vietnam, and this is where it gets funny. We go to a repo depot in Benoit Air Base. And what they would do is they'd have 2 formations a day, and they would call out your name. They call out a pole that was in the ground, a place, and a name. So now my orders, after 8 months of school, my orders said full arm auto din tech control. Well, here I am, a PFC, and after being there for 3 days, they call out, and I still remember, Pole India, Camp Alpha, Van Pelt. So I was looking around for another guy named Van Pelt because my order said full arm auto din tech control. And to me, Camp Alpha sounded like it was between the DMZ and friggin' Hanoi. So I'm trying to explain to people, hey, you're sending me the wrong place. So they put me on a bus with a Vietnamese bus driver who don't speak English. I have no idea where I'm going. Well, Camp Alpha was at Tan Son Nhut Air Base in the middle of Saigon, and that's where the 1st Signal Brigade headquarters was. So they brought me to that, and then they came over and picked me up. Full Arm was about 7 miles south of Saigon. So I had a pretty good time there. When the first day I was there, there's one of the bad, not bad stories, I guess. Over in Vietnam, the mosquitoes were the size of parakeets. I mean, they were pretty big. So I got to the base about 5 o'clock at night, and I went to the order room. They said, look, it's too late to process you now. Go find a bed. And we had 2-story barracks on the base I was at. So I will go from barracks to barracks. Look, I find a bed. Well, I watched this guy get up from his bunk. He takes his boots, and this is on the 2nd floor, and he blocks open the screen door. And I'm saying, what the heck's going on here? This is my first time in getting to this place. Well, about 5 minutes later, he gets up, runs towards the door, and dives off the porch onto the concrete. And the last time I saw him was when they were taking him away in an ambulance. What am I thinking? What the hell am I getting into?
Your new roommate? You just
He wasn't my room. No. This was a 40-man bay. No.
Oh.
This was a 40-man bay. Ironically, a couple of years ago, I went to a a 1st Signal Brigade reunion, and somebody there started telling this story, and he said, I'm looking for witnesses. And I'm talking maybe 4 years ago. And I said, well, I was there. And I didn't know the guy's name that jumped off the porch or any of that stuff. But it's ironic how things come back and haunt you.
Yeah.
Now the good stories. Good stories.
Was there any rumor control or find out why?
No. He was just a little bit. His bubble was a little bit off center. Bottom line, he didn't like being in Vietnam. The base I was on was out in the middle of rice paddies. Luckily, I worked data communications. The building I worked in was air conditioned, not for us, but for the computers. So for all the disk drives and everything. And we used to have to change from our boots into sneakers before we walked in. Sneakers were stored in this. We call it the switch. They would be stored in the switch, and had a great time. I apologize to Vietnam vets because every time I go to a 50th anniversary or something like that, I was lucky enough never to have. When I first got to Vietnam, I zeroed my weapon, and that was the last time I fired it while I was there. So I was there. I was there 12 months, and first 3 months I used to go downtown a lot. We had a bus that ran from our site right into town. After 3 months, I just come back to base and stayed on base. Enjoyed my job.
You saw all there was to see. There wasn't much else to see at downtown.
No. All you can do is get in trouble going downtown. To be very honest with you. So I said, what am I doing? This doesn't make sense.
Which have never been said by a sergeant major or a first sergeant.
Well, there's when I get to the sergeant major thing, it's kind of funny with some of the people I knew there. Good news story. When I was at Full Arm, we used to pull guard duty about once every 3 weeks. And I think I did guard mount 14 or 17 times while I was there. 13 times I was super troop. Starch jungle fatigue, spit shine jungle boots. And I didn't do that. Mama San did that. I used to pay 5 piastres a month. She made my bed and cleaned the clothes. And we were in a 40-man bay. This wasn't no private stuff. And we did have a club on post and a made-up swimming pool, bunch of tires with a liner in it. So it wasn't bad. I don't know a better way to say that. Matter of fact, my section had a corner bunker, so we had responsibility for 60 M60,
Right.
I learned to load an M60 when I got to Italy after Vietnam. So if we got attacked, I was going to run around with a bunch of bullets saying, hey, how do you load this sucker? Because I had no, and by the way, we had 50 cals around the perimeter. If you would have tried to put a bullet or a round down one of them 50 cal, it would have blew up in your face. They weren't maintained. It was amazing. So
Yeah.
that was my introduction to the Army. And then luckily, one of the other funny stories, Debbie and I were getting married when I came back from Vietnam. And our wedding was scheduled for April 4th. Well, when I was in Vietnam, I found out that I was going from there to Italy. There was only 7 places in the world to work my MOS. And I won, and only one in the United States. And that's where I wanted to go. So when I got my orders for Italy, it wasn't bad because I took 45 days leave and had April 10th report to Italy. Not leave for Italy, I should say. And we were getting, like I said, married April 4th. And I did mention that my wife's Italian descent. So we had like 350 people at my wedding. Well, right before I'm ready to come home, get on the plane, or the Freedom Bird, as we call them, to come home, I get called down to personnel, and they said, listen, we got a deal. Instead of flying into California, we're going to fly you into Fort Dix, to McGuire. I said, great. Well, they cut me a new set of orders. Report to Italy on March 30th. I'm getting married on April 4th.
Yeah.
How's this going to work? Well, it turns out when I got back from, this happened about a week before I left there. When I got home, I was back in Brooklyn with 2 sets of orders. One said March 30th, and the other one said April 10th. Back then, we used to carry our 201 files before computers.
Right.
Well, I took them March 30th orders and put them in the trash. Went through my 201 file, make sure there was nothing in there that said get to Italy on March 30th. Everybody was happy to see me when I got there on April 10th.
They didn't know.
Very honest with you. Couldn't do that today. You'd wind up in jail.
No, you'd show up on a some kind of report, white 1, white 7, something, whatever, and yeah, they would.
Did I mention I had a top secret clearance
Back then?
Oh yeah, big
Yeah.
time. Well, even the building I worked at in Italy, we used to wear white coveralls and white sneakers. Thank God in Vietnam they didn't make us wear white coveralls.
Yeah.
So Debbie came over about a month and a half after I was there, and blah blah blah. We stayed and came home. Matter of fact, I got a 2-month early out, so I came home and we came home in December. We stayed in Terrania, Italy, Camp Darby, until right after Christmas, and then we came home for New Year's. I actually got out of the Army on December 31st, off active duty. I shouldn't say out of the Army.
Right.
Well,
so let's hold on. Fine, just a touch. Her Deb being from Italy, did she have a chance to find family there? Was there?
No. Her family's been here forever. It's like my family. My family immigrated here back in 1663 to Brooklyn. So I mean, I'm Dutch background, and nobody that I could tell from any family members. Well, then I was in active duty, reserve. I was coaching youth football in Brooklyn, and about 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, I coached for a Knights of Columbus Council. We coached. We had 3 different level age group football teams. I coached in the middle, and I wanted to put together a first aid kit. Now, as you know, you can't ask for a better watertight thing than an ammo can. So I talked to one of the guys that was a baseball coach and said he worked at the local armory full time. And I said, hey, can you get me a 50 cal box? And he said, yeah, stop by the armory. So a couple of days later, I walked in the armory, and it was one of these. It was built in 1898, 25-foot ceilings, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
And I walked in there, and as soon as I walked in the front door, there was a signal flag hanging outside one of the offices. And I looked at Louis and said, if I'd known that, maybe I would have joined when I got out of the guard. I went off active duty. The next day, I joined the National Guard.
Did they come after you, or you just thought about
I
it?
walked in the door, and then when you say how you lucked out, back in 1974, Vietnam was over. The draft was over. So how do I word this? A lot of guys were getting out of the National Guard because one of the reasons they went in was so they wouldn't have to do some of the stupid stuff I did. Well, I walked in. I was 32 Delta, all sales and all signal. And this was a brigade, at the time, it was a signal group headquarters. So I walked in, my MOS was fixed station. It was all tactical. It turns out that my MOS was directly relatable to an E7 that was getting out the same day I was there. So the AST, Army support technician, turned around and said, well, hell, we're going to put you in his slot. I was an E5. I go into an E7 slot. Well, it turns out where we used to go to Fort Bragg for our AT, and we go down to Fort Bragg, and I'm working with these 2 E7s down there, active duty guys. And I had a good AT. They found out I was technically, competent. Came back, I'm 86. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm 86. Well, before I go to camp the second year down to Fort Bragg with the same 2 E7s, I'm an E6. Well, before we go to camp the third year to Fort Bragg, same 2 E7s, I have time and service, time and grade. I make E7. And them 2 active duty guys looked at me and said, if you come back next year as an E8, we're getting off active duty and we're going in the guard. I never used a waiver. It was just like perfect timing. And I knocked around there for a while. Then Debbie and I moved to Tennessee. I went to work for Tennessee Valley Authority. I worked for Con Edison in New York City. Went to work for Tennessee Valley Authority with the thoughts of building a bowling alley in Tennessee, in Clarksville, Tennessee, which never came to fruition.
You wanted to build and run a bowling alley?
Oh, yeah. Well, I used to be a very avid bowler.
Oh, okay.
Matter of fact, I bowled in Vietnam. Down at the near the American Embassy in Saigon, they actually had a bowling alley. And I walked in there one day, and it was 2-story place. And the guy says to me, where do you want to bowl? I only did it once, by the way. So I said, what's the difference? Well, go look. So when I looked around the corner at the bottom lanes 1 and 2 had no approach. I mean, it was just dirt. So I walked back to the guy. I said, what happened there? He said, well, somebody threw a bomb in the front door. I said, I'll bowl on the second floor. I mean, but I was a very avid bowler at one time.
I would stay away from where the bombs happened. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, I went to Tennessee. Joined the Tennessee National Guard, and I joined an Army unit. And I was the commo chief. I stayed there for about 2 years until the company commander called me up. I was going to school down in Chattanooga, and he called me up and he says, can I take you out to dinner? I said, sure. Well, I got an outstanding performance plaque and everything for him because I used to do all kinds of crazy stuff. And it turned out where we went out to dinner, he let me know that he was moving up to battalion headquarters down in Nashville. The first drill that he was gone, me and the first sergeant did not get along. I don't know a better way to say that. I was pretty aloof back then. What are you going to do? Throw me? Wait, what are you? You can't send me to Vietnam anymore. And me and the first sergeant had some words. So the next day I joined the USAR in the facility engineer unit, and which was good because back if you remember back then,
quick, you could just jump out of the guard, go right into the reserves.
Nobody wanted to join back then. We're talking like 1980, about 1980, 79, 80.
Right.
And I did that for a year and a half, and then Debbie and I one day decided, why are we here? But the big line is, in 1981, I became a contractor, an instrumentation controls contractor in the nuclear business. And that's one of the reasons we came back to New York when I moved out to Long Island. So when I came back, I went back in the signal group I was in, got promoted to master sergeant as the operations sergeant. And lo and behold, about a year later, the signal group became a signal brigade, and the E8 operations sergeant became a E9 operations sergeant major. So in 1987, I had time and grade, time and service. I was promoted to E9. 4 years of doing that, still going down to Fort Bragg or Fort Gordon for AT.
Right. You still seeing those same?
I'm sorry?
Were you still seeing those same E7s?
No, they were already gone by then. No, that was too many. That was too many. If they were still E7s, they ought to be shot. So I spent many years in the 187 Signal Brigade, and had the opportunity to become a command sergeant major in 1991, and I went to a Signal battalion and took that over. And 2 years later, the division at the time, the whole 42nd Division was within New York. But right around 1990, 1991, 92, the division was broken up between 9 states. So my signal battalion was going out of business. So then I wound up being the CSM of an armored battalion. What do I know about tanks? Not a lot.
They have radios.
But, yeah, they had radios, but by then I was so into all the regulations and everything. As I walked in, I told the guys flat out, I'll clean this up. I don't know a lot about tanks, but I know how to take care of soldiers. So you take care of me, I take care of you. And I was there for a little over 2 years, and lo and behold, the division sergeant major position came open. I interviewed for it and became the division sergeant major for the 42nd Division, one of 8 divisions in the National Guard. And I always used to wear my signal crest very proudly, being the CSM of a mechanized division at the time.
Yeah.
And by then I was working in the nuclear industry. I was contracting, and I was doing pretty well for myself. And 3 years after that, in June of 2001, I became the state sergeant major for a 3-year tour, full-time AGR. And 3 months later, 3 months later, the world changed.
Yep.
So in lieu of I wasn't only there 3 years, but I was there a total of 10, and they extended me to age 62, which, as you know, being in the Guard, that's unheard of for an enlisted guy.
Yep.
And to this day, I still wonder. I had 4 adjutant generals while I served as a state sergeant major, which again is an oddity because that normally doesn't happen. When a new guy comes in, they usually bring their own enlisted guy in with them. To this day, I have no idea where they kept me, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's some things we're going to rewind a little bit there. Now, somewhere along the way, you had a couple girls. So they were somewhere in the picture. You kind of forgot that part, but
yeah, I did. 1976, my older daughter was born, and then 3 years later, in '79, my baby girl was born. Well, now they're going to be 49 and 46.
In full circle, they both live in Tennessee. How does that work?
And they both live in Tennessee, and I'm still in upstate New York, and I have no idea. My younger daughter's only living about 35 miles from where she was born in Tennessee. And as you know, because you know my family pretty well, my older daughter, Mandy, decided, or Stephanie Amanda, if you want to get technical, Mandy, when she was 17, she decided to join the Guard. I tried to stay out of her career, believe it or not. And 29 years later, she retired as a CW4. So
yep.
She's doing pretty well. Her husband's a retired E9, and you know Ron really well. And and my mother son-in-law was a pilot for the 160th Special Ops, and he retired. He's now flying for Frontier Airlines. And my younger daughter said, "No way I'm ever going in the Army." And thank God, I don't think the Army could have put up with it, to be honest with you. But
he was as close as he's surrounded by it, that's for sure. And no, it's so you went in the Guard. Now it's ironic, right? Just to put some perspective in there. You joined the Army before I was born. and you pinned on E9 the year I came in the Army. So and I remember one time we talked when I was right at about 20 or just over, and you were like, "You're only halfway there." And I'm like,
yeah.
"What?" You're like, "Do 40 years. You've only hit the 20." I was like, "I don't see that happening." I'm like, "No." You're like, you got another 20 to go. And well,
I will try. One of the things I do like to, when I get around active duty guys, you always get the, "Well, how long are you in?" I said 24. They said 24 years. I said, "No, 24 years is in E9," which is again unheard of.
Yeah.
I said, but the first 4 years was operations. The other 20 was CSM.
Right.
Yeah, and as you know, one of the things that really worked out nice. Well, I got to watch how I temper this. On 9/11, you being from the city. Actually, Debbie used to work in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. She left. She stopped working there in '78. I spent a lot of time at Ground Zero. I got to see. Mandy was living in Battery Park. I used to go down there. I just get in my car up here in Albany and drive down the city for the day and then drive back. And if any important enlisted people were coming up, like from NGB or from First Army, my task was to go down and basically escort them around the Ground Zero area. I got a great picture of me and Mandy. Someone, I don't even know who took it at Ground Zero, and the best one, as you know, is when she was deployed with the 42nd in 2005. I got to actually go visit her in Tikrit. I was going to say Vietnam, Tikrit, Iraq. And I always kid around with folks and said, dads sometimes get to see their sons in a war zone. Not many get to see their daughter in a war zone.
Yeah.
And as you know, it was only a 3-day trip. I only spent overnight at her site because I had to go to visit other soldiers. And matter of fact, I think I've said this to you already. I actually spent four time. I was in the Middle East 4 times, 3 days at a time. That's all they let leadership stay. You have 72 hours and get the hell out because we're such a distraction. Yeah. Good part is where Mandy was stationed in Tikrit. Debbie and I used to send a lot of care packages over. And I get over there, they have a burger, not a Burger King, a Pizza Hut. They got a bazaar. Why are we spending $50-something a package to send you package? You go down to the bazaar and buy whatever you want. No, we still did that.
I got packages from Van Pelt's too when I was in Afghanistan.
Yep.
I won't talk about what was in them, but we knew with that name on there that nobody was going to check them. So don't know if you know all the stories. I have to tell you them sometime if you've never heard them.
Well, the funny story is when I was over in Nam, my mother-in-law sent me a package, and I always giggle every time I talk about this. In the package was a canned ham, which was excellent, hot chocolate, and a jar of pimentos. To this day, I have no idea what I was supposed to do with that jar of pimentos, but she's Italian.
I don't know where that goes in with hot chocolate or a ham. I'm not sure what recipe that was. Maybe something was left out, but no, I mean, so you did a tour, not definitely a much different, tour than probably many people would expect. And but you went and did that, and you came back and you still served, and you served in a time that was not easy in the military. It had to be worse than the National. Like you said, a lot of guys were getting out. The rosters and roles must have been empty. The ones that stayed, there are probably some great soldiers, and there are probably a lot of not great soldiers. How did that shape you as you went on to take, be in command positions for so long, to see the Army? Would it be safe to say at one of its lowest points in the 70s?
70s I would definitely say that was one of the lowest points. Like I said, people that were in the Guard didn't want to be there. They were kind of forced into it because of the situation, and they had the opportunity. Matter of fact, right before I got drafted, when I say I used to bowl a lot, we hung out at the bowling alley. And 2 of my friends said, "Hey, we're going to go down and talk to a reserve recruiter. You want to go with us?" I said, "Nah." Well, both of them went in reserves. I didn't. Like I said, I got home and had that draft notice. The good part of that story is the night I got my draft notice, I had just come back from bowling 2 guys that worked at the stock market in Manhattan. Me and my friend, they were some of his work buddies, and I won $125 that night bowling. And back then, that was a week's pay, and I was real happy until I got home.
Somehow in the 60s, early 70s, you either had a rabbit's foot or a 4-leaf clover or both in your pocket.
Well, I don't want to say it was all who knew what you were getting into. I mean, you know how the Army is. That it's like now being very involved in the local chapter of AU Association United States Army. We do 50th anniversary commemorations, and it's for anybody that served between 1955 and 1975. And I feel very honored to be the one that actually presents the pin. But when you ask them to say something, a lot of them apologize for not going to Vietnam. And I said, guys, not many people raising their hand saying, send me to Vietnam. There was the Army pulling out cards saying you're going. So don't feel bad that you went to Germany or you stayed stateside. You still served. That was the whole thing. That's how I always felt. And like I said, in my position, I wasn't in combat or any. I mean, it was in a combat zone, but that was it. The one good thing I can tell you is that, and I mentioned before about having a top secret clearance, through our site went all the B-52 strike infos, all the messages. So I can take claim to that, But other than that, Don't shoot me. Don't shoot at me, and I won't shoot at you. Is that kind of thing. So, and we had the Vietnamese work right on post, and they cleaned up and everything else. A lot of them were probably taking steps to make sure how far we can go, but they knew we weren't a threat. To be very honest with you, I don't know a better way to say that. They said even in 10 to 68, when the Viet Cong and the Viet Cong came out of Saigon, they went around our base. They didn't try to go through it or anything else. I think one mortar might have hit the building I worked at long before I got there, but that was it. I mean, they spent weeks picking up the brass from the helicopters flying over. But other than that, it was. We were always told that we had 4 big billboard antennas. And when I say big, they're big, and that the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, used to use our antenna, beam off our antennas to send signals out. And that's one of the reasons why we never were attacked. We were part of that communication system.
Now, did you guys carry weapons on base at all?
Oh yeah, we had. Well, it was funny when I first got there. They used to have footlockers of magazines, loaded magazines in the barracks, and you'd have your own M16 at the time. And after too many people came back from the club shooting holes in the ceiling and stuff, they moved the bunkers, the magazines into the bunkers. So we still had our weapons. We didn't have any rounds to put in them. So specifically, the bunker that we had control of for our section was completely on the other side of the post. So I would have had to run between all these one-story buildings to get probably about 300 yards. And I said, if we get attacked, I'm going out the back door and I'm getting to the nearest bunker I can get to get some bullets instead of running around with no bullets in there. But luckily, knock wood, that never happened.
Yeah. That's and again, that's a perspective of people think of Vietnam. They don't think of that. They don't think of those, whether it be retrans, relay stations, the support side, logistics.
Ours was the largest signal base in Vietnam. When I say large, communication wise, we the first Signal Brigade was formed back, I want to say in 1965 or 66, to put control on all the signal assets that are in Vietnam. And that's the shirt I have on. I'm the membership chairman for the First Signal Brigade Association.
Yeah, you keep yourself.
Another funny story in where I was a place called Phulam. The guys used to get together every once in a while, and in 2009 they decided they were going to go on a cruise. You would think the Bahamas. No, they went to Canada. They went to Newfoundland and all that stuff. Well, I was supposed to retire in June of 2009. And this cruise was going to be in September. I'm sorry. And I said, hell, I'll be retired. Let's go. I've never been on a cruise in my life. So we signed up for the cruise. And then General Pluto came to me and said, would you consider staying for another year? And I said, well, General, if I'm going to stay for 1, I might as well stay for 2 and go out of 62, go on Social Security. And he said, okay. Well, so now when I went on the cruise, I'm still in. I'm still in the Guard. When the guys I was stationed with at Phulam found out I was a command sergeant major, they couldn't believe it. I was one of the biggest rebels, and as I mentioned before about, hey, I'm going AWOL. I was a rebel and always, I don't want to say a rule breaker, but I had my own way of doing things. And I think you've known me enough that they could not believe I was a command sergeant major. They still laugh about it. And what are we talking about? 15 years later. So that's my claim.
Saw you from that at that perspective in that time, and they probably were surprised you even enlisted in anything once your time was up.
Absolutely, because I definitely wasn't going to do it when I was overseas. No. Italy was a little different. Like I said, Italy was very controlled. I do have a funny story about my friend Mike. We've been friends now since May 7th of 1969. We did 32 weeks of school at Fort Monmouth. We went to Vietnam together, and we went to Italy together. The only reason we're still friends, we never worked together, because I would have killed him. I walked into work one night in Italy, and as I mentioned, it's not the installation itself wasn't top secret, but what we had there was. And I was walking into, after going through all the guard shacks, guard gates, I'm walking up to the building, and I look over in the grass, and there's a peace sign mowed in the grass, probably about 40 foot across. Big ass peace sign. So I walk in, I put my coveralls on, put my sneakers on, walked up to my friend Mike, went into our section, walked up to my friend Mike and said, why'd you do that? And he said, who told you? I said, nobody had to tell me. He said, well, I was out there cutting the grass, and the lieutenant said, leave it there. I like it. Well, in the next week, you name it, 3-letter acronym, CIA, AS, they were at the site trying to find out why there was a peace sign. And this was in 1971. Why there was a peace sign in the grass at a top secret.
Rated, yes.
They didn't catch him. That was the good part. He's still alive.
Now, let me ask you, had you not been, and I know this is, hindsight and, kind of looking back, but do you think you would have ever went in if you hadn't been drafted? Did you ever have a hankering for the military or anything like that growing up?
I was in the Boy Scouts 7 years before that, but no, Troy, I sit back and reflect on that now and how different my life would be, to be very honest with you. I'm 76 now, and thinking back, I would have never joined the Army. I was working for Con Edison, was happy as hell. I would have just stayed there for 30, 40 years and, retired from Edison. And, it's hard to say what I would have did, but I could almost guarantee I would not have joined the Army. Yeah. So my Uncle Sam did me a good job.
Yeah, he sure did. And that is interesting, right? Because we don't, all these things that happen in our lives and through your entire career of just decisions you made, assignments you got, right, could have changed. Yep. Your number came up to get, go to this this duty station or get this job and go take this battalion or whatever it may be, of the things that could have changed. And so, I mean, it's interesting, right? So you spent, a few years active duty, then the rest of the time in the Guard and Reserves, yet you're still a very military family.
Big time. Yeah. I'm still involved in a lot of things.
You're very, very involved in a lot of things. And did you ever, so let me ask you this, knowing your family as I do, and I have a lot of inside perspective. Did you ever think your daughters would marry soldiers, and did you support that, encourage it, like wish they hope they never would?
Well, they took different paths. Both my son-in-laws, this was their second marriage. Okay. With Sandra, my younger daughter, she met her current husband when they went to school up in, she was in Potsdam and he was at the school next to it. So they met there, apart for years. He went out, he married his childhood sweetheart, high school sweetheart, I should say. And they were divorced and they got married. Then Sandy and him, I almost said hooked up. I don't always use that word. It doesn't sound right. Dads don't like to use them words. But they met again. They met again years later, and
that's going to be great.
and Ron and Mandy met, and I knew Ron way before Mandy knew him, because he was my NCO of the year for the state a couple of years before that. Right. They actually met when they were deployed in 2005 with the division. Ron was in the RDF for the TAG, for the division commander, and Mandy was over there, and she was the flight ops specialist, ran the LZ for the division. They came back and started dating, and the rest of the history. Now they have their two boys, and my younger daughter has a boy and a girl, and the boy's going to be the death of all of us. He's 4 years old and he's a terror. But no, there's when you think back and how things, came about, it's amazing.
Yeah. It's like I say, paths could have taken either one. I don't know. Mandy's commenting in the chat. She said, Daddy broke Troy. I don't know what that meant, but I don't know. Hey, he's not talking about me hooking up. So there we go. But yeah, so when you've done these tours over in Iraq, when you've been a leader so long and seen so many units out in New York deploy and other places probably, but I mean, what does it mean? I mean, just to give some people a little bit of inside baseball here. I mean, when I came back from Afghanistan, you were there to greet us. You were there when we got off the plane. I think we flew back into Philadelphia or JFK. I don't know I honestly don't remember where we flew.
You probably flew back into McGuire Air Force Base at Fort Dix.
Yeah, it was a blur, but I remember you were there, had the buses, and you were, and I know you made it a point to try to be there, for all the units come back, just like you made the point to try to get over and see soldiers, but how was that? And as you know, even though you did one tour in Vietnam, but you led soldiers so much, you trained them, you shaped them to be successful and do, and then, you know, obviously 9/11 happened and a lot of them had to, you know, go do that. How was that from a career perspective to see the so many young men and women go over and come back, not even counting your daughter, but just young men and women from New York?
No, I know. I will tell you that if I found out a plane was coming back to either Fort Drum or to Fort Dix or McGuire, I would get in my car, and it's 231 miles to McGuire. I would drive to McGuire, shake hands, get back in the car, and drive home. Being a Vietnam vet, we didn't get that.
Yeah.
There's no way. And one of the trips down to Dix, matter of fact, when Mandy was coming home, I love to tell the story. Mandy was only an E5, E5 sergeant over in Iraq, and she did run the LZ for the division. And we had a aviation unit out of California deploy with the division. And when I went down there to visit, to greet them, I had a CW4 pilot walk up to me and said, "By the way, Sergeant Major, is that your kid?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, she was raised right." I said, "What do you mean?" We knew that if we landed into Crit, that we were going to be on the ground, loaded, and in the air. There was no goofing around, none of that. And she, as an E5, she ran it. And one of the stories I love to tell, one day I was told that there was a full bird colonel went down to the LZ and said, "Listen, I got to get out of here." So Mandy looked at all the paperwork and said, "I'll get you out of here at 2:00. And he said, "No, I got to get out of here." And he said, "Colonel, I can't get you out of here before 2:00. So he went into I think it was Lieutenant Colonel that she worked for, and Al Thiem, matter of fact, I still remember his name, walked in there and said, "Hey, I need to leave, and I was told I can't fly to 2:00. And the Lieutenant Colonel looked at the Colonel and said, "Well, who told you that?" He said, "That female E5 out at the LZ." And he said, "Sergeant Van Pelt." And Colonel said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, sir, if she tells you you're going to fly at 2:00, you're going to fly at 2:00. You keep on breaking the shoes, you might not fly till tomorrow." and knowing my daughter, I said, "I can see that happening." So I guess from looking at I guess the way I formulated my career, she learned something.
Yeah.
If you have a job to do it right. And then the backing of the Lieutenant Colonel that backed her up, that's the way leadership's supposed to do it. So right. I was always proud of that story. She did tell me one time that they had an air raid, and she jumped in a culvert that they had next to the flight facility. She jumped in the culvert, and instead of bringing a weapon out of a vehicle, she brought Harry Potter. She fessed up. She took a book. She didn't take a weapon. She did fess up about that. and you can ask her about that the next time you talk to her.
Yeah, but I guess if you don't, yeah, okay. I don't know. I guess if you're jumping in the culvert because of incoming, not sure what a weapon would really do either. But maybe that could have, yeah. But
there was no income. She never told me if there was actually stuff coming in. But
yeah. Well,
the downside to the whole thing after 9/11 was the burials.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of funerals. I think the count was I buried 32 soldiers from the New York National Guard. That was the bad side.
Yeah.
So, and again, I would not miss a funeral if I had to get in the car and drive Buffalo, which I've done many times. I would make sure I was there. And I still, I'm sitting here with no notes. Ben Schuster. I still remember when Ben was buried. Somebody in his family, they sent them the Gold Star pins to the family.
Yeah.
And the brother got a hold of them and gave them out to all his friends. And I remember a young lady out there came to me and said, "Can you get me more?" Which is kind of not the normal. And I went ahead and I got a hold of Fort Drum, and they sent me the whole set, so we can give them out to the family. But I still remember the names. That's the thing. Like I said, Ben Schuster, that was probably, was that before or after you deployed?
No, it was. So that was while I was at Shelby. We were training Yeah, because as you know, my wonderful bride was handling all the FRG stuff, and
Yep.
yeah, she gave me the call. So Ben had just got into country, and then she got to deal with all that too. But
Yep.
yeah, we had a Christmas dining in or something like that for the unit, and Ben was there, and I think he shipped out 2 days later to go get trained up, and he had just gotten in country. I was down in Shelby getting ready to go in Afghanistan, and when that happened, and yeah, so that was one I missed, but not one I miss seeing him every couple times a year, as he's just
Well, I will.
2 miles away.
Do you remember when we sent away the 2 platoons with the unit in Oregon?
Yeah,
It was
those were mine. That was,
okay.
yep.
Well, you probably never heard this story, and I definitely have to clean this one up. I wound up calling up the brigade CSM. He picked up the phone. I'm sorry.
From Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't know him from a hole in the ground.
who I know very well, sadly, but yes.
Oh, so do I. I just saw him a couple of days ago, matter of fact. And I called him up, and
his house one time when he was in DC at NGB, and I'm like, "You really want me to stay with you now?" Like, we did not get along in Afghanistan, but either way.
well, I will tell you flat out that I when they were ready to deploy, I didn't know him. I never met him before in my life, and I'm thinking about, let's see, you were sending 2 New York infantry platoons away with a unit that I know if I was the CSM and there was a lousy mission coming up, I would kind of, I actually called him up on the phone, and this was the whole conversation. I said, Sergeant Major, this is Sergeant Major Van Pelt from New York. If you flick, I didn't say flick, I said, if you flick with my soldiers, I'll kill you when you get off the plane. And I hung up. I mean, that was the whole conversation, and that's how I felt. Bottom line, I mean,
it was a cruel thing when they came to me and the commander and said, pick 2 platoons worth of guys.
Yep.
And we begged to take the whole company. And they were like, we know they need a whole company. Like, nope, the tasking is for 2 platoons.
Yep.
And I had to put together 2 platoons and then face their families. And, and we took the brunt of it. We said, look, if you want to tell them I picked you and you didn't have a choice, that's fine. But
right.
just to send I used to tell people for a long time, up until November 2004, to be exact, the worst thing the Army ever did was take my unit and not take, the whole unit, not take the command of the platoon until we lost Dave. And when we lost Dave, then I said, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me in the Army, because I couldn't be there. Not that I would have protected him, not that I could, but still it's one of my guys. And like you said, if you get attached, and one of the platoons got attached to an Oregon battalion attached to an Arkansas brigade. So they were like 3rd, 4th down the line. They were not getting the primo duties. They were not getting, and it was gut wrenching to have them take those soldiers. And, we just sat back here and just supported the best we could. But, it was, and then what, right after they get back, they yank me into, hold on a second. They yanked me and the commander for Afghanistan. So it was like, you could have taken us all at one time.
But, well, that was one of the downsides of Vietnam. It was constant repos.
Right.
It didn't go over as a unit. It went over as an individual.
Yeah.
So that changed a lot of stuff.
And, you talk about that. That's how Ben went, right? Ben was an individual.
Yep. Oh, that's right. Yep. He was an individual augmentee. Yeah. And
I had a number of those of guys that did not go or before that, raised their hand. They wanted to do their part. And man, you're really flapping out there in the breeze when you go by yourself and you're a junior enlisted guy, and you're just at the beck and call of whatever someone wants to give you,
I agree.
But
that's a dangerous way to go.
Yeah. Yes. I know everyone's chasing whatever they're chasing. They want to be part of it, but it's like I've told many folks, Bob, guys that we know that have went back over and over and over. And I've always told them, you're chasing ghosts. You're never going to get what you had that one time, because it's not about being in the combat zone or being there. It's about the people to your left and right. And those people aren't going to be there the second, third, or any other time. That was a one-time deal.
Yep.
To have them in your left and right. And, and in some friendships, as you talked about Mike, like, with me and Ron and a whole bunch of us that went to, those friendships last forever. And several guys went back a couple times. They never found it. You're not going to find it.
No, I got you. Like I said, we've been friends. Actually, after we got back, we got out of the Army together at Fort Monmouth. At Fort Dix. spent New Year's here, and then he went home in March. Now, we've only been out of the Army 3 months. In March, he called me up and said, "So what are you doing June 3rd?" And I said, "Well, it's my birthday." And I said, "Why?" He says, "I'd like to be my best man." I said, "For what?" We've only been home 3 months. And they've been married ever since. So it's worked out pretty well.
Did I meet Mike?
You probably met him, yeah.
At Mandy's retirement, right? I think it was. I feel like I know I've met him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, that's something. It when you look back over 42 years from the start of it, from getting your one token, which is hilarious that they gave you a token.
That's a true story.
At least they did that. From that all the way through to when you finally retired, anything that stands out that was like just a shining moment or the darkest moment of that time of your career, not just in Vietnam, but the whole thing. Like you talked about, you didn't miss funerals, you didn't miss people.
Well, like I said, there were 32 dark moments after 9/11. Of course, 9/11 that topped everything. Who would have thunk it? To be very honest with you. One of the things I'm really happy about. I remember when it came time for my retirement, and Mandy called me up and said, "So, Dad, do you want to be on the committee for your retirement?" And I said, "Well, what kind of decisions?" She said, "Well, whether it would be in uniform or not." I said, "Well, if it's not in uniform, I won't be there." And she understood what I said. And she said, "Well, how many people should we plan for?" I said, 100. She said, "Are you kidding?" And when I walked into my retirement party, about 350 people. It means I did my job.
Yeah.
So, pardon me when I get a little bit choked up here.
It's understandable.
That was probably the golden moment. I mean, there's other times, graduations from schools and stuff like that. Not to bellinger, because stories keep on coming in. So when I went to the Sergeant Major Academy, I was already in E9. I didn't have to go, but it was the right thing to do. Well, already being in E9, the academy's broken down into groups of 15. Well, Troy, I've never given blood in my life. Well, this was in 91, right before, Desert Shield was on, not Desert Storm. And they walked into the classroom and they said, "Well, we anticipate the ground war starting in the next 24 hours. We're looking for blood donors. Who wants to give blood?" Well, in a group of 15, I looked around. So 11 guys 11 people, because we had females in the class, had their hands up. I said, "Son of a..." And I remember going upstairs. My faculty advisor was a SOF, a Special Forces E9. And we go upstairs, and the Red Cross guy has a earring on, and he wasn't in the military. And Ricky Thompson, the Sergeant Major Thompson, says to him, "This is Group 13. We're here to donate blood, and but after I donate, you have to give it back to me for disposal." And the Red Cross guy says, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, I've had hepatitis. He's been in every little corner of the world." And the Red Cross guy said, "Well, then why are you going to give blood?" And he said, "This is my group." So we go in the room, and it was him and one of my classmates and me. Well, they laid me on that table. There was 3 of us at a time getting given blood. They laid me on that table, and when they stuck that needle in my arm, I was trying to think about everything else in the world except that needle. Well, these 2 clowns, "Bob, you ought to do this more often. Your blood's almost blue." Blah. And then, unbeknownst to me, when you give blood, you get lightheaded. I was gone. Smelling salts and everything. I mean, I was totally gone. And then the war lasted 48 hours. If I would have known that. No, I'm only kidding. So, I mean, it's things like that you remember.
Right.
Forever,
First time when I was in Fort Hood, we volunteered as fast as we could to give blood, because if you gave blood and you went in the morning, they take half the platoon in the morning, you got the day off. So when the platoon sergeant would come out and say, "We got to donate," who wants to give? You raise your hand as fast as you could, because you got to go donate blood. You didn't go to the motor pool, and you got some orange juice and a cookie, and you got the day off. And man, if it was on a Friday, you just scored a 3-day weekend. If you didn't do it to the afternoon, you still had to go work in the morning because half the platoon's gone, and then you got the day off. The giving blood was a highlight. It was
Nah, not in this boy's body. I don't like to give blood, so.
and I had guys I knew that were so wanting money and broke so bad they would go downtown Killeen and give plasma after they had blood.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, but that was.
I've never been that broke in my life where I'm going to give away blood. I just have. Even being in the Army all them years, I still have a fear. Not anymore, but I had a phobia. I should say a phobia of needles. I lived. My grandmother used to take insulin when I was young, and just got in the head that you don't need needles. And look, I stayed in the Army for 40 years.
Yeah. Had a few physicals, I'm sure, and had a few needles.
Well, I will tell you, in basic, when they were using the guns back then.
Oh yeah.
And I remember walking between two guys, and one shoulder I got a plague shot, and the other one I got cholera shot. And I walked by him and I said, "That wasn't bad at all." And then a couple of seconds later, when the pain kicked in, I'm gone. Gone again, smelling salts.
Well, again, I came in when you got promoted to E9, and they were still using the guns, but it wasn't as bad as till I went to Korea and then went to Desert Storm, and then we got so many weird shots and things in the butt cheeks, and it was getting hit from all sides. It was it was something else, but they've gotten better with that now, I guess.
I think 83, there was about 6 of us that went to over to Manhattan. To the big armory in Manhattan, and we were the first people in New York State in the Guard I know to get tested for AIDS because we were going over to Germany.
Oh,
and before they back then, so the 6 of us went over there and blah blah blah. Did spend a lot of time in Germany. We used to do two ATs a year. Used to go there twice a year. Our I don't know what it was called back then, but our wartime mission at that time during the 80s was to put communications in the Netherlands from Germany to get soldiers from Rotterdam into the Fulda Gap. And then in 89, the Russians gave up and did away with them great tours. So it wasn't bad. It's better than Fort Bragg, I'll tell you that, going to the Netherlands.
I know a lot of people would say that's better than Fort Bragg. But well, hey, Bob, we've been going for about an hour, little over an hour. I want to thank you so much for coming on, man, and give me some of your Tuesday night. This was great. I know a lot of people were watching, listening. I was getting texts and comments. It just, what an interesting career. 42 years, it came in 68, right? 68?
69. March of 69. Right. Yep.
A month before I was born.
Got promoted in March of 87 to E9.
March of 87. Yeah, that was a few months before I was about 3 months before I came in the Army. And yeah.
And the rest is history.
And you were there at my retirement party. And
yes, I was. Yeah.
And contributed a lot to my delinquency that night.
Well, you mean that little drinking stuff?
Yeah. Well, that's all right. But hey, thank you so much for coming on, and your wonderful wife, the angel to us all, Miss Deb, who I heard laughing in the background earlier. So
yeah, she left in a couple of stories.
But so great to see you guys and have you on. And again, thank you so much, man. I really
no problem at all, Troy. Anytime you need anything, all you can do is ask.
I knew you would have some stories, that's for sure.
Oh, I got more.
Anyways, everyone, thank you so much for watching Lima Charlie. This was episode 24. New York State Command Sergeant Major retired Bob Van Pelt. Let me just sink this in again. 42 years, 3 months.
3 months, 27 days.
27 days, double retirement. But doesn't get double retirement. That'd be nice if you did, huh? If they don't.
I do pretty good.
But thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate our first draftee ever on this show. So yeah, there we go. All right. Thank you so much. Tune in on Thursday nights. Follow us on the socials, and thank you so much. Follow our sponsors, and we'll wish everybody a good night.
All right. Bye-bye.